So this morning I just finished reading an excerpt of Edward Farley's book, Theologia, the Fragmentation and Unity of Theological Education. And the chapter was on the history of the concept of Theologia, yeah. And it took us through the different periods of the church and how theology was interpreted during those times and what it meant during those times. And Farley covers three different periods: the early church period, which is like the apostolic period in the early church. Then the second period that he covers is the medieval period through the Enlightenment, so 1200 through 1700. And then he covers the third and final period, which is Enlightenment to today, largely. And he talks about the different elements of theology and kind of what's constructed, how theology has been considered and perceived across the timelines. And in the early church, theology was an idea of illumination through understanding and getting to know God, and kind of exposing the scripture. And it was really an expository experience through commentary on the scripture, through oral teaching, and really an integration of the illumination, the knowledge, and the trying to live a godly life, which moved into the medieval period, which kind of looked at the discipline and the knowledge of theology a little bit differently. Schools started to arise during the early period of the medieval age. Catholic schools and monastic schools, and tradition was passed down. And during these time periods, the discipline of theology really became such that it was thought that theology was not only the illumination, but the practice of engaging in that in a systematic way, and in a way that we could orient our hearts towards getting theology and gain knowledge through practice. So it wasn't just a knowing of God, but it was a knowing of God with a supplement of human kind of orientation towards God. And there were two camps. There was Aristotelian and Augustinian. And Aristotelian was really more of this scholastic discipline, and it became this ordered practice, and it became this, it led to enlightenment. It leads into the third period of universities, and then the Augustinian was more towards the pietism, the knowing God and knowing Him with your soul, and orienting your heart around Him and the wisdom that comes from Him. And so out of these both, we get the third period, which is the modern period. And so out of Aristotelian, we have the Enlightenment and the university structure. And then the university becomes this pluralistic area for the study of theology, where it's more of an intellect, more of a practice, more of the hermeneutics and the study of theology, where we're breaking it down systematically and we're understanding, and we're getting away from unification of both the knowing of God and the practice of the habits of the heart to a scholastic endeavor. And then the Augustinian route comes into the modern period in more of a pietism orientation, and that goes towards the practical acts of being a minister, and that's where you get seminaries. So on the one hand, you have the enlightenment coming through into the university, and you get the different disciplines of study, hermeneutics, theology, and such. And on the other hand, you get pietism, which is really the practical necessities of being a minister in the day and age. And you sort of lose the orientation of the heart and of the habitus, the orientation towards a godly life, to the intellect or to the practical works side of it as a minister. And out of that, there's three major areas of trying to reunify that back into place. And I'm forgetting the first one. The second of which that Farley mentioned was formation, which is sort of to bring back into the picture the idea of forming this unity. The third one was a justification for the study, that these works have a practical place. And the first one was sort of an existential, personal experience with God, which are really, all three sort of seem like they've navigated away from the true unity that it was experienced with the first church, where it was this wisdom, this illumination, this knowing of God was the practice of theology. So I just wanted to get that out while I'm at the gym, because there's no better place to sit and think than on the reclined bike. So I was trying to summarize that for myself. Maybe you learned something too. Maybe I'll post a link to the book down below. So that's article J in the Theologic Reader of Habits of the Mind, or Habits of the Heart rather, for the BILD Antioch School program. Edward Farley. Thanks much.